Many things, but for the purposes of our discussion today, we'll go with political analysts. Thank you for coming to the program. In the middle is Honorable Millie Odhiambo, a member of Parliament. Welcome. And of course, our resident political analyst, Dr. Edward Kisiangani. You're all most welcome. Tonight on Opinion Court, we'll be discussing the biggest stories of the week, and we begin on security, we begin on vetting, I beg your pardon. Now, this week we saw MPs continue with their onslaught against PES Monica Juma after denying her the secretary to the cabinet post. We also saw them cause a bit of a fuss over the CBK governor, Patrick Njoroge, whose marital status seemed to be the hot topic of debate during vetting. Tonight we are asking, Makodingo, let me start with you, or the Mac, as I see you are affectionately known as. What exactly should vetting be, and in your opinion, is Parliament getting it right?
Thank you for having me. The law is clear that the vetting should consider qualifications, ability and experience for that person for the office that they're being nominated and vetted for. Qualifications, abilities and experience. Those are the things they need to consider, and it's laid out in the law. Yeah. In the report they gave on Monica Juma, for example, Parliament gave her flying colors for all those three. Then they went to look for some nondescript reason, yeah, why they thought that it was wrong for her to be in that office, that she had written some letter. So in her case, they just missed the point. There was no vetting that took place, yeah, and if it did, the report did not match. In fact, the law says that they make a report on the qualifications, abilities and experience of the person for the office to which they were nominated to. They did make that report. Then they went to make a conclusion that was contrary to the report that they actually did make. Now, we've seen this happening in Kenya before. I mean, there is a cabinet secretary who could not open her mouth during the entire vetting process at all. She couldn't speak.
Are you referring to now the tourism scene?
Yes, she could hardly speak, okay. And the vetting report was clear that she did not qualify. Somehow Parliament went ahead and approved her. There are quite a number of cabinet secretaries who would otherwise not pass a serious vetting process. In fact, nearly the entire cabinet, if it was a US vetting, for example, they would not pass, because other than the qualifications, I mean, the president read to us the qualifications, their degrees, MBAs and PhDs and whatever, but they had nothing close to the experience that they required for the officers that were vetted and appointed to. Some cannot even speak. There is a cabinet secretary, I'll not name names, who cannot
name
even
names. This is opinion court. We like it raw here.
Kazungu Kambi can hardly make a statement, right. Yeah, in any language, yeah. But yet is representing workers, a lot of whom are more learned, are more experienced, have greater skills than he does. Now, I don't understand what considerations were made at that point, but according to the law, a lot of those people should not be in the offices.
But surely there must be a difference between a case of nerves and professional qualifications. Now,
fortunately for her, she's actually come out pretty well. Yeah, for Phyllis, yeah, the cabinet secretary for tourism, she's actually fairly excelled. Now, Olelenku, on the other hand, failed miserably during the vetting. The former internal security CS, and for what I understand, is still a cabinet secretary without portfolio. Failed miserably during the vetting, and even failed more during his tenure as cabinet secretary for the interior. Yeah, and we've seen this with a lot of the cabinet secretaries who probably even did well during that vetting, which wasn't fairly serious, but we haven't seen them or even heard from them since they took office 2.5 years down the line. Is
Parliament missing the point, Honorable Millie? And I know you're a member, and specifically when it comes to women, do you feel there's a gender dimension that affects them when they appear before a panel of a heavily testosterone-driven, committee? To put it mildly.
Well, I wouldn't say exactly like Parliament is missing the point. When we started, there was a lot of teething problems. This Parliament is not a lot like the old Parliament that had a lot more experienced members that have been serving for a long time, but I think it's getting its, it's getting its path. But I would want to say that what Honorable Makodingo is saying, and excuse my saying honorable, today the whole of this week I've been calling everybody honorable, but I think for me the issue is not that it's just qualifications. Even if you look at the American process, it's not just about qualifications, it's about suitability for that position. And when you unpackage the word suitability, it has a lot to it. It has a lot about the fit for the job. In fact, if you ask me, Parliament should not focus a lot more on the qualifications, because it's presumed that by the time you're reaching, you've already met that qualification, unless the executive was blatantly, you know, just ignoring the law. If they're not ignoring the law, then at the very minimum, the person coming has the qualifications. So we are not doing in Parliament an interview. We are basically vetting for suitability. And for me, that therefore means it opens a lot. And this is where we have the challenge, that there is a gender component. And if you look at the way Juma was treated, as much as a lot of my colleagues have said there's no gender dimension to it, yet one of the issues that was raised about Monica is the letter that she wrote. And if you look at that letter, and if I could listen to what some of my colleagues were concerned about, sometimes we don't hear it, but you know, as a society, we are not socialized that men, you know, women question men. We cannot handle strong women, and that you always find a lot of strong women getting into trouble. That's why you have Nancy Baraza getting into trouble for pinching a nose. That's why you have, you know, Sholay getting into trouble. That's why you have now Juma getting into trouble. All the strong women at some point or the other will get into trouble, because a lot of people can't stand. And that's why for me it was very pleasant, if I might say in quotes pleasant, when you had the governor nominee was raised was asked a question about his marital status, not because it's a good thing, but because for once it was happening to the other gender. It's always happening to the woman.
This time he wasn't married.
Yeah,
and that was the problem,
because usually it's always a question asked to the woman. Right. So I said, phew, at least let the man hear it for once. Right. Not that it's a good thing, but let him hear it for once. And that's why in Parliament you've seen us pushing very strongly for the 2/3 representation for women, so that you can hear more increased voices of women in the House.
And I believe I heard you say you're willing to be taxed 100% for that to happen.
Yes.
That would be the day, Honorable Millie.
Yes,
I'll move from that.
For the sake of the women of this country, I'm willing to be taxed, so that we have one extra woman in the House.
All right. Yes. Prof, has there been evidence that vetting of these public office holders by Parliament has resulted in better performing officers? Is there a correlation between the two, or is the exercise futile?
I think it's a mixed grill. There are some women who have done well, others haven't done well. There are also some men who are brought in, even at the public service level, not state officers. There are some men who have done well, but the others have done miserably. So you have to go case by case. But I think to pick up from what Mark Odingo is saying, I think the focus should not be entirely on the people who have been victims of this process. In fact, we should look at the guys who have murdered certain people in the name of vetting. And this is Parliament. Most parliamentarians have a problem with everybody who does not agree with them. That is the first thing we should know. There are a lot of problems with everybody who doesn't agree with them. And the problem is that Parliament, the Kenyan Parliament, suffers from acute paranoia. And you know, paranoia is a disease where you think people just hate you for the sake of hating you.
Because to some degree it's not a paranoia. People hate Parliament. Even if you go to Facebook.
For no reason. You believe we don't hate you for no reason. But the reason is
this. We hate them for a reason.
But the paranoia is that these guys just hate me, but I'm okay. The reason is that in 2012 we passed a law. The Parliament passed a law. You were a member of Parliament at that time, the Act of Parliament on Leadership and Integrity. That is where we start. That law, the CIC drafted the original document, which I looked at. And CIC said that even before somebody is appointed, given a nomination certificate by IEBC, that fellow must have been vetted by IEBC. But that thing was deleted. In fact, there was a provision that all people must be vetted. In fact, members of parliament should go to their higher education loans place to be cleared. They should go to the police to be cleared, so that we know the people who are competing. Yes, but they went just to get certificates. The point I'm raising, Anne, is this: that if this parliamentarians passed that law knowing very well that it will serve them today. So what do you expect of a parliament which passed a flawed law in order to accommodate people who should not be in public service? What do you expect of them when they do the vetting? They do it the wrong way. So the parliament does not qualify, my conclusion, does not qualify to vet anybody.
That leads me to my final question on this subject, and Makodingo, I'll phrase it to you. How do you then insulate a vetting process against abuse by legislators, before whom you would have to take that sort of, revision of the requisite laws? Is it possible at all, or is this just one of those things that you want to say, we can't fix it?
The constitution is fairly vague. Yeah, it says the president or whatever nominating authority will nominate and parliament will approve. Yeah, parliament went ahead and made a law, setting the parameters for that approval. I think it's unfortunate that in this case, for example, and a few others, they actually ignored the same law that they made for the vetting process. However, like, we have a 5-year-old constitution. I actually think that given time, this will correct itself out. Yeah, that this parliament will probably get to learn, the next parliament will do better, and probably in another election cycle after 2017, we will get a parliament that progressively will get to know this.
But I don't think we are a law unto ourselves. So I would want to say that yes, it will get better, but if Parliament uses irrelevant standards for vetting somebody, like in the case of Monica, then she can actually go to court, and the court can actually, decide otherwise. That's where we have the three arms, that one acts as a check and a balance against the other. So even when we are vetting, we have discretion, but we must also exercise our discretion.
But aren't you likely to hear from you separation of powers?
No,
regardless of what the
that is actually, let me tell you, very honestly, separation of powers, separation of powers is about checks and balances. So if one goes excess, then the other arm must check it. So really, but what I'm saying that in this situation of Monica, the question that we should be asking is, did we have reasons for rejecting, Monica? And yes, members were saying there's this letter, and I respect their views on that, but I don't agree with them, because I think there's a subtle gender issue around it for me.
You see, the public, Anne, is not aware about the actual reasons why Monica Juma was rejected. But to lead the public to ask questions, they must look at Chapter 6, which becomes the basis of the Integrity and Leadership Act, which I have referred to before. And it has 54 items. So what Monica Juma should do, and even members of the public should do, is to ask, among these 54 articles, which items under that act, which one did you use to send away Monica Juma? And again, among the 54, marriage is not one of them. So if they were trying to vet the central bank governor and the marriage was not part of the 54 articles, you are a lawyer, you know that. Which one did they use to refer to the marriage?
Fair enough. I must pause this conversation there, Dr. I beg your indulgence. I truly beg your indulgence.
I actually want to disagree with them on this.
Okay, very briefly. We must move on.
But marriage was not a reason for the governor.
No, but why are they like
fair
because it's in the law.
The thing is, the people of Kenya, we the people of Kenya, in our wisdom, gave Parliament the authority to approve appointments. I actually don't think the court of law has a say on this one, even if they have no reason. I mean, they can reject someone for no reason, just because they don't like the way you look the day you present yourself before them. They have the delegated authority to do so. I don't think the courts have the authority to
work under certain rules.
Fair enough. We must pause that one there and move to our next topic of the day. Well, this week it appears the government scored big in the war against terror by thwarting an attempted attack on a KDF camp in Lamu. 11 suspected terrorists were killed, and today the state says that it's going ahead with its ambitious plans to build that wall between Kenya and Somalia. Honorable Millie, is government finally getting it right?
Well, I think we do first of all want to encourage our soldiers for very good work. However, I think we have very short memory as a country. Once we do the good work, 1 or 2 months down the line, we have already forgotten. So for me, the war on terror is not just about looking at this, because it's also, on terrorism, because for me, it's also on the issue of radicalization. And I'm not seeing a lot of activity and action, especially with our school children, on dealing with the issue of radicalization. So it must be a war that we fight at all fronts. We must fight it at our borders, we must fight it, on the issue of radicalization, and we must fight it on the issue of corruption, because you cannot be fighting insecurity while corruption is thriving, because it thrives on the issue of, corruption. And that's why, for me, the wall is merely symbolic, but it will not keep terrorists who are already within, within the country. I was being told the other day that a young man was found in my constituency who was suspected to be a terrorist, and he's not from another country. He is born and brought up in my constituency. So, and he's radicalized. He was told, taken for some training somewhere, and he was told they're going to be given money, and then he was told come back and look for targets. So it's here with us. So even if you are building a wall on Somalia, they're already here. So it must be a multi-pronged approach on dealing with terrorism. So we must be more serious than we already are.
What would more serious look like for you, Prof?
More serious would be to completely discard the idea of the wall, because the assumption is that the wall is the center of action, and that in security terms is a wrong move. You assume that these terrorists will be eavesdropping at the wall and you see them and then shoot them, and that is not the question. They will be eavesdropping anywhere. It is a very pedestrian approach to the bigger problem, because these guys, as you have heard, they are in Homa Bay, they are everywhere. What we are supposed to do, instead of investing in the wall, even the United States attempted to put up a wall to prevent Mexicans from crossing into the U.S. and prevent black barons from entering the U.S.
And that of Jerusalem as well?
And they didn't succeed. So what we are supposed to do now is this huge amount of money that they are using to put up the wall, they must invest in high technology and intelligence gathering. We shall get these people, when they are in Laikipia. If they are at the border, we shall get them. That is where the money should go.
But we keep complaining about porous borders in this country, no less on this show.
Yes, we can. The porous borders are there, but the reason why we have those porous borders, we don't have the technology to supervise our borders. If we have proper technology, we don't need to be at the border to know that somebody is violating or somebody is moving the pigots like it happens between us and Uganda. So you need that technology. Yes, I have to say that. Or somebody has already occupied Migingo. You don't need to be there physically to know that somebody is doing that. So we need to invest in the technology and the intelligence services, and then that is where we shall get the security right.
Mac.
And I think enough has been said about the wall. I used to be a supporter. I now find it extremely ridiculous.
What swayed you?
Me. No, not him. The work I do, it includes a lot of security mapping, and from what I have gathered, there is quite a bit of Kenyans who went to Somalia, what we call Al-Shabaab returnees. The ones we gave amnesty, but we didn't say what we'll do after they have reported to us that they have come back from Al-Shabaab. That the wall is no longer helpful. It's going to close them in, and as you heard, they're in Beta. But that said,
no, they are not in Beta. There was one.
But that is not a haven.
But that said, I think more often than not, we tend to underplay, to downplay the work that our security services and security agencies are doing. 2 weeks ago, I was in Isiolo. I happened to have paid a courtesy call to the county commissioner when some ethnic tension arose between two communities in Isiolo, and I literally put a timer. In 5 minutes, 3 vehicles were full with APs ready to go. And in under 10 minutes, they were in an area that was 15 kilometers away. As in, within 5 minutes, they were ready, geared up, and these are young men in AP who have been there for a year or 2 years. An alarm was raised. In 5 minutes, they were ready to go. And these are young men who left the station knowing very well that there was a very high chance they could not come back. Yeah, and they just went. And they went in the middle of a clan, of a tribal war. Yeah. And if they hadn't gone there for like, if they're delayed, like, you know, we usually hear stories that the police don't want to go somewhere. If they're delayed for another 1 to 2 hours, it would have been a bloodbath. Yeah. Right. And this happens everywhere. The security services, the national government administration offices, and the police are working under extremely difficult conditions, especially in the northern parts of this country, and they don't ask questions. They wake up in the morning, they don't know whether they'll come back, but they'll go anyway. Now, I know we've said we are not doing enough even in schools. I had a story, I think I was either in Nyeri, of a story of a girl who, after finishing Form 4, yeah, they had come to Nairobi, to Isili. Then when they went back to the school to pick their certificate, they were looking for a job. She was told she had a school fees balance of 40,000 shillings. She texted someone, and in 10 minutes, the 40,000 shillings had been sent to her. The head teacher, the principal, held her in the school and called the police and said, I know this girl.
How is that possible?
She's been poor for a long time.
Right.
She went to Nairobi, suddenly she had 40,000 shillings in 10 minutes. So it is true that even our schools are actually beginning to do something. In Isiolo today, teachers will tell you that when a child is growing, is starting to have behavior that is unexplainable, they actually call the parents and they talk to security services. So we are actually
that is actually what I'm telling you where the gap is, because it's more of individual initiative, like the one that he's saying. Even the one that I'm telling you was suspected, not that it was a terrorist that was found in Bita, it's because people saw the lifestyle change. But what I'm saying is the government must put a program that is not accidental, but that is targeted especially at young people, because we are dealing with the issue of radicalization. So we must actually look at issues like that. I know what we are trying to emulate, for instance, by building this wall, is to do what has been done in Israel. But Israel has also put in a lot in terms of intelligence gathering. I have been to this country, you know, and when we talk about the porosity of our borders, it's not just a physical aspect. Porosity also has to do with the issue of corruption. Intelligence, corruption, because why our borders are porous? Go to Uganda, any of these ones where you can walk out. The other day I was in Busia, sometime early last year, and I was sitting and just watching people walking across, you know, from an official border point. We are just walking. Nobody's asking you anything, and you are expecting, and the ones who have goods are paying money to go across.
Perhaps under the EAC, you know, free movement of persons, etc. I don't know. Ladies and gentlemen, we can only take one final question for our final topic, and I'm just looking for your general views. You know, Omar al-Bashir, the very much wanted president of Sudan, made his way to South Africa and safely back, you know, to the Sudan, was not arrested despite international, you know, pressure on the South African government to hand him over. And there are only two sides to this debate. The first is either the ICC has completely failed in Africa and should just wake up to that no African president is going to surrender another president to them, or African leaders have failed the continent by, you know, refusing to bring to justice leaders who have perpetuated crimes against her citizens. One thought on that and we wind up, Prof.
I think the African condition is complex. And it's complex because I think the leaders in Africa have decided that they don't want to be slaughtered one by one. They want to be slaughtered as a group.
En masse.
So really they make a lot of mistakes, and now they are withdrawn into the cocoon of self-protection. There are so many mistakes taking place, so many crimes taking place in Africa. You see, even here, and just our next door neighbor, you see the mess in Burundi. You expect people to say, even if we don't want the ICC to come here, and we have been saying we don't want the ICC, that fellow in Nkurunziza is preparing for a situation which can cause a genocide. Now, when the international community asks, you say it is interference in African affairs. So why Bashir is being given a hero's welcome and even being given a send-off is because we have a shortage of heroes in Africa.
Wow.
Really I would want to say that there is no African president, maybe only one, probably Botswana, if you ask me, that could surrender another president, but the rest, you know, they know that if I do this, it might just happen to me, because most of us are not very willing to do free, fair, you know, proper elections like Burundi, what's happening in Burundi. So just to be on the safe side. And it's a story of Africa over and over again. It's not a new thing. But on the issue, you know, what I know, though, is that ICC is also under pressure to show that it's working. So what they probably do is wait until some, you know, of the presidents are out, then they will, you know, chase them. And that's why Kenyan situation is kind of unique. However, the only challenge with that is that then you have situations where suddenly most of the African presidents don't want to leave, lest they go to ICC. So it's a tricky situation.
It'll be continental tourists, perhaps.
Exactly.
Briefly and finally, sir.
I don't think ICC has capacity to provide justice. I have a problem with the concept of international justice, that somehow imagine taking a president to The Hague will solve the problems back at home. But on the issue that the African presidents are afraid, I don't think there is a likelihood that that Zuma will end up in the ICC. So the fear about him protecting one of his own because he might end up there doesn't exist. The AU has a position on ICC. Yeah, a very clear, unanimous position on ICC that no sitting president will be taken there. Yeah, Bashir attended an AU function, a gazetted, yeah, AU meeting in Santon. Zuma had to let him go. I mean, you are not going to be holding AU meetings in countries and then you hand over your colleagues to the ICC. So for me, he did the right thing for Africa, and the right thing for the situation.
Wow. Ladies and gentlemen, great talking to you. Thank you for coming on the show tonight. We're taking a short break. We're back with more news after these messages. Stay with us.